I was reading an article recently about average house renting prices for my region. And so I was looking down all the regions and looking at the average cost to rent. And this article didn't specify what kind of rent it was. Is it a one-bedroom flat? Is it a three-bedroom house? It didn't say. But I was looking at the prices and there wasn't a single average rent in my region that wasn't at least £200 a month more than I'm paying where I am now. And some of them were £400 or £500 more. And I know that in part that might be because I'm in an existing tenancy and there's only so much they can put the rent up each year. They have it in their contracts, their tenancy agreements, that it only goes up a certain amount. So I'm sure that if I moved out and then tried to re-rent this place from scratch, it would be a lot higher. And I know that the tenants below me who moved in last September are paying more than I am now because they moved in as fresh tenants. So I've talked about the possibilities of moving, and I've thought about moving, and then every time I get excited about the idea of giving up this place and moving, I run into all sorts of logistical nightmares. So I rent a two-bedroom flat in not a great place. It's not amazing. It's not the worst. I've seen and lived in a lot worse over the years. And I think comparably the rent isn't bad. I've got two bedrooms. I've got private parking. All the amenities I need are on my doorstep. And because of that, it means that some of the things that I spend money on are considerably less than if I didn't. So for instance, I only buy my food on yellow sticker discounts and with Nectar points. If I moved somewhere where the supermarkets weren't as close as they are now, I might potentially have to be doing a food shop once a week run. And then I wouldn't be able to do what I do now, which is on a Tuesday evening at 6 o'clock, I walk over the road to my local supermarket and pick up whatever yellow stickers are there that I want. And effectively, if I needed to, I could go over every evening at 6 o'clock and pick up a few bits that were really cheap and fund my grocery bill that way. I also use two survey sites to earn Nectar points, so I can go down the road to my local Sainsbury and buy a lot of other things that I wouldn't normally be able to get on discount, basically for free. So that makes a big difference. People have suggested to me, well, why are you renting a two-bed? You could go down to a one-bed. The situation is that when I moved in here, I didn't need a two-bed, but it was the first viewing I got where it seemed like a place I could live in, because some of the places I saw were absolutely horrific. I also had a problem with, because I am self-employed, I don't pass credit checks for rental at all. And I was more than happy to go in and say, look, put me on a 6-month tenancy. I'll pay the full 6 months up front. That way you know you've got your rent. And a lot of places won't touch you when you do that. I looked into this because I didn't understand why this would be a problem. And apparently it's something that drug dealers do. So when they want to grow cannabis or whatever in a property, they'll rent a property and pay up front for the whole term. And then you can't get them out. I don't know. I don't understand it. Anyway, so I lost out on a couple of good places because as soon as I said that I needed to pay up front because I would pass the credit checks, they basically said, no, we're not interested. And this was the first place where they said, yeah, it's no problem. We're fine with that. We'll put you on a 6-month tenancy. You pay 6 months up front and that'll be fine. And that got me in here. And to be honest with you, despite all the problems and the complaints I make, and that the landlord is a bit of a tightwad when it comes to some of the repairs. This is the best quality place that I saw. And, you know, it's structurally sound. There's no mould, there's no damp, there's no violent crime in the area. And it allows me to live as best as I can given the circumstances. So if I give up this place, it's got to be better. So someone said, well, why don't you downsize to a one bed and you can save money on council tax? I'm already band A. You can't get any lower than a band A. I also get the 25% discount because I am a single person. I'm living on my own. So I've already got all the discounts and the cheapest possible council tax that I can for my area. So if I move, I would still end up probably in a council tax A band because of the size of property I need, but another council tax region might be more expensive. My parents' region, for instance, is much more expensive than mine. And of course they live in a bigger house, but by region, council tax costs change in the region. And it's the same with things like utility bills. So here where I am, I think we're probably quite average in terms of water bills, extra costs, and gas and electricity in terms of standing charges. But I could move somewhere else and end up paying a lot more in standing charges. Their rates could be a lot higher. I might not get the same setup in terms of energy, so I'm lucky that I have gas and electric here. I cook on gas, which is great, and then that means that I can be more picky about what electric I use, because electric obviously is the most expensive thing. So that would make a huge difference as well. In terms of, so when I first moved in here, I moved into a 2-bed not needing a 2-bed, but within months of moving in here, I lost my studio in town, my workshop where I was running my business from, because the owners suddenly announced they were retiring and selling up. It was bought out by another company. They were a really crap company, horrible people. I fell out with them and off I went. So I moved my entire business into that spare bedroom, and that's the only reason that I can still make stuff, do stuff, store stuff at no extra cost, because obviously it's rent here and my landlord doesn't mind that. They know that I do that. I don't have clients in, I'm not customer facing, it's just like a little studio, a little workshop. So if I moved from here and took a smaller place, I either have to get rid of everything that's in my business, which predominantly means me possibly having to shut down the creative side of what I do in terms of earning income, because I won't have anywhere to put it, or I have to get a storage unit to keep it in. And if you're going to downsize to save money on your rent, theoretically, and then you go and get a storage unit, how is that any better? Equally, if I decided to move from where I was here but stay in the area, that is a waste of time, because when I move, I want it to be a good move. I want it to be a move that gets me closer to my parents. So ideally, I would like to live within an hour's drive of my parents. Now, my parents live in the most expensive part of the country. They live in the southeast. They're theoretically just outside London. And it's not cheap. I had a look at 1-bedroom flats within an hour of where my parents live. And I was looking at a push, I might be able to get something for £1,000 a month, which is considerably more than I'm paying now. I pay less than £700 a month for where I am now. And everything down there costs more money. So the energy supplier, that's the one that charges the standing charges, they are more expensive. They come under Thames Water, and they are a lot more expensive, and they're in a lot of trouble at the moment, Thames Water and those and South East Water. It's weird. They pay for two water bills. So they've got one that's the water supply and one which is the sewage and everything else. And one of them I think is Thames Water and one South East Water. For some reason they're completely split and mine isn't. So that's going to increase that cost. I don't know where, I mean, my parents live a 20-minute drive from the nearest supermarket. I would have to think carefully about where I was going to move to ensure that I was getting access so that I could still afford to buy on discount, because I'm sure as hell not going to be able to afford to spend more money on food if I'm paying an extra minimum £300 a month for my rent. And the other problem is that if I move down there, the only benefit of it is that I'm closer to my parents. It doesn't improve my financial situation. It probably makes it worse. It won't necessarily change my life, because a lot of the areas that I would be able to fall down where my parents are probably a lot worse than where I am now, in terms of being dodgy areas, not nice areas. There are some very not nice areas down near my parents that I could probably afford. And you get what you pay for. So the cheaper your rent, probably the worse the area, unless you're very lucky with your landlord. You might get a really nice landlord who doesn't need to make any money out of their house and is happy to run at a loss so that you can afford to rent. But it doesn't really work like that anymore. So I have to weigh up, and there's the practical aspect of it, that it is me on my own, living here in the Northwest. Anywhere I decide to move is going to come with additional costs that on the basis that I would basically be moving for the sake of it, is going to cost me more money. Because if I move locally, I'm going to have to pick up everything and just move it. I'm going to have to hire a removal company, because I can't do it on my own. Even if I can hire a van and I can drive a van, but I can't lift a sofa. I can't lift a 12.5 stone sewing machine. I would have to sell everything and start again in order to downsize enough to get things into the back of my tiny car or into a van, stuff that I can lift. So that's going to cost me money. And of course, there is the problem of me finding anywhere that will accept me on a 6-month a pay up front tenancy. And a lot of tenancies now, and I don't know if it's still the case, but certainly a couple of years after COVID, when there was this real flood of people wanting to move out of London and because of COVID and all that sort of thing, and the demand was really high, landlords could demand, or letting agencies could demand, what they wanted. So because people's jobs were so fragile, a lot of landlords and agencies were demanding a whole tenancy cost up front. So if you were looking for a year's tenancy, they would ask for the entire year's rent up front, in case you lost your job and couldn't pay your rent. Now, theoretically, I could raid savings accounts and do that, but why should you have to do that? And I'm self-employed. I don't even have a proper job to lose. I don't have a job to lose at all, actually, because all my little jobs are quite self-sufficient. But paying a year's rent up front is crazy. So unless I am moving home for my parents, that is the only reason that moving is an advantage to me. And unless I can get a job that is going to fulfill my life, I've been talking about having more purpose and having a job that, if I'm going to go and get a job, having a job that I really enjoy. If I could get that down there, that would add to that enriched sense of life. But the logistics of it is that I am 5 hours away from that. And the logistics of moving and getting a job and everything falling into place at the same time is almost impossible. You'd have to move first and then try and get the job. And I'm on a year's tenancy, so I've only got one chance a year to successfully move without incurring fees from my the letting agency. Because if you break your tenancy early, they're going to charge you extra money because they want that. Even though these flats are so easy to rent. I mean, most of the time they don't even go on the market. It's so quick. They have waiting lists. They never have a problem. There were like 7 or 8 viewings for downstairs in, I think, 2 days. And by the end of the second day, it was let. These are not the sorts of places that people move to for a long time. They're stepping stone places. So I'm the longest staying tenant there is. Been here almost 7 years. Most people tend to stay 2 or 3 years and then leave. Sometimes it's a stepping stone between situations. Sometimes they leave because they just can't stand living in this area anymore. It depends. You never know what you're going to get until you move in somewhere. So you might move in somewhere and then realise that your neighbours are crazy, or the street outside is dangerous at night, or that your car gets vandalised every week, or there are so many different things that you don't know until you're living there. So it's really hard to do that research when you don't live anywhere near the place where you want to go. So if I was going to move voluntarily, I don't want it to be until I can move further south. I can't afford to move further south. The further south you go, the more expensive it gets. I mean, I'm already paying like roughly £200 less a month for the average rent in my area. Imagine what it's going to be like down south. So this idea that, you can just move, it'll save you money. It will not. It's definitely going to cost me more money. And then you might say, well, go and get a job then. Go and get a job. So I go and get a job, which won't be a job I will want to do. It'll be a job just for the money, because I cannot imagine this area having the kinds of jobs that I would like to do, bearing in mind I think I would want to go into different work areas that I've never done before. So I'm not going to be like trained. I'm better off expanding on what I'm doing now and trying to increase my income that way. There are too many logistics that are too risky. I don't want to make any like knee-jerk reactions to this. I have done that in the past. A lot of my moves previously have been very knee-jerk. I've moved very fast, but I didn't have all the stuff I had. So in previous existences, I never had furniture of my own. I was always living in house shares or as a lodger. I never owned stuff. And I've nearly always had a studio. So all the business stuff, all the awkward stuff to move, stayed where it was, and I kind of moved around it. So I didn't have to worry about that. Now everything is in one place. And if I was going to move a very long way, I would get rid of the big furniture, get rid of the heavy stuff, and then start again. It would work out cheaper, but I still have things that I cannot move on my own, like the sewing machine. Now, let's say I scrap doing the creative stuff and get rid of all that. If I can downsize that, that might enable me to downsize a bit. It does mean a loss of an income stream. It does mean a loss of something that is good for me. Creativity has always been a part of my life since I was a child. I've always been a clothing designer. I started doing costume design when I was 12, and I started doing that at home. So I've always made things. It's a part of my day-to-day life. So I don't know how that would change. And I could just get a storage unit and just start making stuff that goes into storage. But then you've got to make it work in a different way. You've got to ensure that you're not running at a loss on that. Whereas I don't have to worry about that now because it's in my spare room. You know, I'm already paying rent on the property. It's not costing me anything to run in that respect. So it's not as simple as just saying, well, you can move somewhere smaller and save money. It does not work like that. Unless you know somebody, unless you know the right people, unless you know the areas that you're trying to move to, it's a lot of work and a lot of research to get it right. And most of my house moves that I've done in the past have been regretted because it's very hard to know what you're getting into until you move in. And then you discover all the problems because estate agents don't know, letting agents don't care. They just want you in there and paying your rent. And the number of times I've moved in somewhere and then the first thing I've been thinking is, right, how can I get out of this? And it's just so hard to know what you're getting into. So it is not that easy. And I first left home when I was 18. So it's been over 30 years since I left home. So, and sometimes I think obviously leaving home is a good thing. You become independent, whatever, but a lot of my moves have definitely been regretted. I ended up in some very awful situations. And I hope that I wouldn't do that now because I'm less impulsive. But you never quite know what you're getting into. So you just need to be really careful. So, it's not as simple as, move, you'll save money. I think life would get a lot more expensive if I moved. It would have to be a very strategic move. It would require a lot of research and making sure I was making the right decision. And of course, there's a deadline on that because my rent renewal comes up every October. So it would have to be geared around that date. And you can't force these things. It takes a long time to find the right place to live in. It takes a long time to find the right job. Anyway. So that's my thoughts on moving. And I had a little flurry of excitement a couple of weeks ago where I started looking at the costs. I started looking at this and looking at all the costs and planning, well, if a storage unit is this much and my rent is this much, how much extra do I need to earn? So my income was my best income last year for I think my best income since 2020. So 2021 it started to dive post-COVID. And last year I made 16,500. I've reckoned I would need to earn an absolute minimum of 22,000 a year just to break even if I moved south. And that's being very conservative about it because I don't know exactly how much certain things would be until I moved in, like utilities, things like that. So I would have to have a better work in place, and getting better work in place for when you move down is really difficult. You can't guarantee where the job's going to come up, and you need to be in the area to be able to go to jobs, to go to interviews, to do all that sort of thing. And there are a lot of things not on my side. I've been self-employed for 13 years. They're going to ask, well, why do you now want to go back into work? And why did you want to be self-employed in the first place? And so I don't have things like references. I don't have lots of experience in the last 13 years of working with other people. I don't have many industry experiences like I used to. And a lot of the things that I used to do don't exist in the same way anymore. And I could move down and then spend the next 6 months or a year trying to find work. I'm also on the wrong side of 50 now. And as we all know, the work market is very ageist. It still is, and I see a lot of that around. A lot of that's happening at the moment, and I think I would be taking an enormous risk when at least I know what I'm getting here. At least I know when my rent goes up every year, I know how much it's going to go up by because it always stays the same. And I can plan for that. I know that's going to come. I know every year, for a whole year, how much that's going to go up. So I've got no reason to not be able to improve on that. And I'm also not terribly keen on sacrificing the work-life balance that I've got now. I like having time to myself, and I know that's a bit of a luxury. A lot of people are just slaves to their jobs, and they have to be for the money. I don't, and I am very reluctant to give up what I have now, which is a much better work-life balance. I like the freedom. I like that my income comes from lots of different places. So if one income stream goes down, there are others. And I like that I can pick and choose what I do. Because I spent so many years of my life just doing what I was told, towing the line, hand to mouth, never been able to enjoy life because I was stuck in jobs that I hated, that weren't good for me, and having to do that. Because when you get stuck in that rut of having to pay for the bills that you pay, you have to get the job to match. I have downsized my life to match the income. And I don't mind the setup. I don't mind the way I live now. I don't mind shopping for discounts. I don't mind shopping on vouchers. I don't mind all of that. I don't mind but I enjoy growing some of my own veg. I enjoy finding ways to save money. People think that I must absolutely hate my life, having to constantly watch every penny. I actually really enjoy it. It's it's a thriftiness in me. It's a need to save, and I actually get a buzz from it. I enjoy it. I cannot imagine changing that at all. So there are lots of aspects of my life I really enjoy. The only problem is the distance from family. That's the only thing that's the problem. And that's quite a major logistic when you live so far and there are so many little things that you need to get in place to be able to make it work successfully. So that's my thoughts on moving. It's not worth taking the risk on. And having thought about it, I don't think it's going to happen. I can't live in a van. Come on. In some ways there are some great things about that, but the number of problems that also come with that. It's nice to watch other people living in vans who've been doing it for years and they've got their setup and it works for them. But all these people, where they have a choice, eventually end up going back to sticks and bricks. Because it's something it only fits into your life for so long. And there comes a time when your age is against you, your health might be against you, and unless you have no choice, and I know that there are lots of channels for people who are living in cars and large vehicles because they have no choice, usually people that have no retirement funds or, all sorts of things have gone wrong. And I don't want to be forced into it. I want, if I did it to be by choice, and I don't think it would be a good decision at the moment. So that's my thoughts on moving. I'm better off playing it safe, at least for now, because I'm not that reckless. Anyway, that's my thoughts on that.